Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of the Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. Today, we are taking a look at Air Force Falcons, who finished 9-4 last season and capped off with an Armed Forces Bowl win over James Madison, and just wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on March 12th. We have a special guest joining us today. Welcome to the show, Rick Baum at Falcon8Fan on X.
Thank you guys for having me. Wow, that intro's got me fired up.
Right? Yeah. If anybody's listening just on the podcast, go take a look at the YouTube. We got a nice intro video. Get you ready to run through a brick wall.
Jeez, absolutely.
So, Rick, you are the Air Force Sports Insider. Just kind of, if you want to let the people know kind of who you are and how you got to this position.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Rick Baum. You can find me on X, Falcon 8 Fan. You can also find me on Air Force Football Fans, also on X, and myriad of other social media outlets as well. Became a Air Force football fan in 2009 by accident, really. Frustrated, Colorado sports fan, and took that hour-and-a-half drive south, and I've never left. It's a product there, originally undersized athletes. That's changed over the years, but competitive and that team aspect at a military academy is something incredible to watch.
Absolutely. Well, those of you that are listening who aren't familiar with Air Force, they have I don't know if I want to say unique offensive scheme, but Rick, do you want to tell the viewer or listeners and viewers, if they're not familiar with Air Force, can you just describe this offensive scheme?
Yeah, so the military academies are probably the exception in D1 football to their type of offense. So like I said originally, these were undersized teams just by the nature of being in the military service. Now, we have had exceptions in the last 8 years as far as size. We've been allowed to get bigger, which has helped, but we haven't really changed much. I know Army is switching to a more conventional offense after 70, 80 years in the offense that they had been in originally. Of course, they've been around for over 100 years. Air Force in their 67th year has traditionally ran originally a wishbone type of offense, and then for decades now the vaunted triple option offense. So it's
a tough one to prepare.
Takes a lot of discipline for sure. I'm an Old Dominion fan, and we used to play Georgia Southern back when we were both in the FCS. And Georgia Southern back then ran a triple option. And I remember we played them twice in the playoffs, and it was like neither team could stop either team. It was basically whoever had the ball last is going to win. So it was some very exciting games, but it takes so much discipline to defend that those triple option offenses for sure.
Yeah, and if you watch Air Force football, their true triple option consists of fullback first. Everything works off of that fullback dive, right? So quarterback takes the snap, fullback heads towards the line of scrimmage, and that's where the triple option starts to work. They either, the first option, give it to the fullback. The second option is work off of the fullback and run something that looks in the NFL like a read option, but really what it is, it's a flow to the left or the right. Then the quarterback has the ability to keep the ball, to pitch the ball to the tailback, or to stop and throw the ball to either the slot, the tight end, or one of our rarely used wide receivers.
I think, though, I do think Air Force uses the wide receiver more than my Iowa Hawkeyes. So
that's not saying a whole lot there, Luke. There was, you'll appreciate this, Rick. There was the Mountain West fan at the Colorado State Virginia game. who had on a shirt that said Virginia basketball is Iowa football.
How ironic.
All right, let's talk about a little bit about the 2024 team. So we were talking a little bit beforehand. This season Air Force loses a lot of production from last year, both offense and defense, really. But really kind of starts up front. They lose, looks like top of their top 8 offensive linemen in terms of snaps played in 2023. So what does this mean for the 2024 Air Force offense, and how did the offensive line shape up during spring practice?
Well, if you want to talk about this team, you got to kind of take a quick peek back. In the last 4 full seasons, Air Force has won 40 football games. Now, that's a byproduct of a COVID year. We did not get the COVID exemption like a lot of schools got. What we got was the ability, because of what was going on, to get a turn back. So that loaded this roster up for 4 years, basically. And I'm not going to say the cupboard is bare, because by no means it isn't. We've got some amazing athletes, but to your point, the offensive line looks nothing like it has the last 3 years. I did get the opportunity to talk to Coach Lobo yesterday. Just an amazing coach. He's been, he's a former undersized Air Force, lineman who came back and, after some time at Ohio University, to come here and coach our offensive line. And he's got his work cut out, but I truly believe in him, and I know what they can do. We're a fast offensive line.
So you're talking about losing some production there in 2020 from 2023. Lost a lot of experience at quarterback. Big position in all of football, but especially here in running a triple option, where we lose Zach Larrier and reserves Jensen Jones and Ben Britton, who's out of eligibility. What can you tell us about the quarterback position for 2024?
Well, right now, I would say that it's pretty thin. So we've got John Boucher, who played in relief last year, did not start a game. He looked impressive at times. John is from Port Charlotte, Florida. Amazing baseball player as well as football player. He wears number 12. He is the quarterback this year. I don't see a line behind him. I don't see anybody pushing him. We've got a handful of sophomores to be current freshmen that will get some opportunities, and then I'll know a little bit more this fall what that position looks like. But John is more than capable. He's a little taller than your typical Air Force quarterback. He's got a really good arm, which isn't always a signature, but he has the ability to run the ball, and he's a field general. So I don't think we're going to lose as much as a lot of people might think at that position.
Do you think that with his arm, maybe they might tend to pass? I mean, obviously they're never going to pass a lot, right? But will you think maybe that lends itself to being able to do that more often, I guess, than what we've seen recently?
There's always that hope. You guys had mentioned the receiver position at other schools. We've got some very capable receivers. I would like to see that, but we are a running team. I can't argue with that.
Well, that's a great lead into the next question. We talked about replacing the O-line, talked about quarterback, and now we're down to the running backs here, where they had to replace some running backs as well. They lose their top 3 rushers, of course, quarterback Zach Larrier, Emmanuel Michelle, and John Lee Eldridge, as well as a key reserve in Owen Burke. What will this rushing attack look like in 2024?
Well, I think it's going to be probably one of the surprising strengths of this team once they can get this O-line to gel. Our fullback is a guy by the name of Dylan Carson. Dylan is a sophomore currently. He'll of course be a junior. He was able to carry the ball 68 times last year in a reserve role behind, Emmanuel Michelle and Owen Burke. He was the third guy. He gained just under 500 yards at a 7.3 clip with a couple touchdowns. So he wears number 20, which is very familiar to Air Force fans. That's Brad Roberts' number. Brad is serving our country in Destin, Florida at Eglin Air Force Base currently, and former NCAA, rushing champ 2 years ago. So that position, and in particular that number, is going to look familiar to Air Force fans.
Is Aiden Calvert, is he also playing fullback or?
Well, Aiden will be playing the role that John Lee Eldridge had last year, and coincidentally, a year ago, John did also take snaps at fullback in the spring, like Aiden did, and it gives him that duality in the role. So he's a bigger back, just like John Lee Eldridge was. Aiden Calvert, I expect to have a breakout year. 27 carries, 222 yards. That's an 8.2 yards per carry average. And this kid's got that next level speed. He's going to be somebody that you're going to go, hey, Rick talked about him.
That's what we like to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
We kind of talked about the receivers, so I just wanted to kind of just backtrack just a little bit and just let the viewers, or Rick, why don't you tell us about the wide receivers? We got 3 top receivers coming back.
Yeah, so before you look at the wide receivers, we had a big loss on our tight end position. We had Caleb Rios the last 3 years. Caleb is a rare commodity. He was approved for a grad transfer. He will be announcing his destination here within the next couple weeks. So we will see more of Caleb, which will be pretty cool. So his replacement is a guy by the name of Bruin Fleischman. Big guy, 6'5". He'll be a good target, but of course he'll initially be a blocker. Wide receiver wise, we got a couple seniors, Jared Rosnos and Brandon Engel. They caught a handful of balls last year. Jared Rosnos got hurt, came back for the bowl game, had a long touchdown. Very efficient, kind of a smaller wideout, but sticky hands. A kid by the name of Dylan Evans, you'll see him. He's a big play capability wide receiver out of the Frisco, Texas area. Dylan will be somebody that will catch your attention.
Would you say, does it remind you of like Micah Davis, how he was used maybe back when he was in Air Force?
Yeah, that hurts my feelings. Micah, who wore number 0 for the Falcons, was a dynamic player. His dad, Dexter, was an NFLer. Micah went to JUCO. He ended up at Utah State University, and he's going to be a thorn in a lot of people's sides. He's very special. So, yeah, that's a great comparison. Different position. Micah played a little bit on the slot. Our slot position is going to be Cade Harris. He wears number 21. He's a kid out of Utah. He's made a statement from time to time when given the opportunity. You'll see a kid by the name of Jordan Scarborough. He's about that size, that mid size. And, there's also some surprises on this offense.
So I think you already answered this question, but I will ask again anyway. I think you mentioned a running back for this, but is there an offensive skill position player that we haven't talked about that you kind of see, or who do you think is probably the big breakout from offensive skill position here?
Well, I'm going to give you a name, and if we don't hear about him, then I will be very surprised. This kid his name is Cade Frew. Cade is probably going to end up at tailback, though he has the ability to play slot when needed. Cade is a kid out of Jacksonville, Florida. He went to Bowles High School. If that sounds familiar, that's where Mac Jones, who was recently traded back to Jacksonville area, went. Cade was one of the top rushers in Florida State high school history. A small kid, so he went to a school that appreciates smaller athletes, and I believe that this kid is something special.
I love to hear, like, being in Iowa, our big thing is wrestle and play football, because that footwork goes together really, really well, and you get that low center of gravity, and you just kind of you kind of more bounce off of people as opposed to take that hit and go down. So I love to hear that he has that wrestling background. That's big, and I think an important thing that I'm not so sure everyone else maybe has that same sentiment.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch him. He's a special athlete.
All right. So Air Force, we talked about the loss of production on the offense side, but they're also on the defensive side losing their top 6 tacklers from last year. How did the defensive unit look as a whole during spring practice?
Young. They looked really young. Specifically, they looked young because some of their upperclassmen were held out, whether it be rehabbing from injuries or whatever the case may be. It's a work in progress. Brian Knorr has had a top 10 defense the last 2 years. I have faith in him. I believe he'll get these guys in the right direction, but it's going to be a work in progress. Absolutely.
Speaking of the defense and kind of talking about the defensive line and the linebackers, losing the top 2 linebackers, and in terms of tackles anyway, Alec Mock and Jonathan Young, and then losing the pass rush of Bo Richter. Did anybody step up that kind of looks to fill those roles in the spring? And if so, who they are, and what can you tell us about them?
Well, overall, I would say the linebacker play, like I had mentioned before, was a work in progress. Now, one individual, has made it known that he is going to be a starter. He's a younger player. He's currently a sophomore. He's out of the Dallas area. A young man by the name of Jack Curtis. Jack was a 3-star originally, and he's grown into his frame. He's going to be in that young blood / mock role, probably captain of the defense at some point. He's pretty impressive. The other spots are still going to be a battle this fall. I've seen some guys make plays. A guy by the name of Matt Devine, who's going to be a senior. Some of the few seniors that might get an opportunity. Matt had a scoop and score in the spring game. He looked good, but I think they're going to go young. I think that you're going to see sophomores and juniors, at that position.
So safety is another position group where we're losing the top 3 from 2023 in Trey Taylor, Jaden Goodwin, and Jalen Mergerson. Trey Taylor was quite the talent. We kind of talked about it a little bit before for Air Force. Are there players waiting in the wings? Sorry for the pun there, but to step up and take those roles there?
Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what period of time you're talking about, originally last year we were talking about Trey Taylor at free safety and Camby Goff at strong safety. In the Parents Weekend season opener, Camby tore his Achilles tendon in the first game. He left the Air Force Academy. He was a senior. He left. He did his medical rehab and has returned, and he will be the starting safety, maybe. And I say maybe because Camby and Goody, which is Jaden Goodwin, they were kind of interchangeable. So at some point, Goodwin went to a different position. We've got a hybrid linebacker safety position in our defense. Camby played there quite a bit, so we'll kind of see where he ends up. back end of the defense will be the probably the older part of the defense. We'll have Goff back there as a senior. We'll have Jamari Bellamy, probably one corner, Tom Collins at another. We'll also have, guys like Levi Brown, who's a young kid out of the Atlanta area. He's played a little bit of that spur position, that hybrid position I was referencing to. So, we will see how it ends up.
Is there we talked about offensive player breakouts. Is there a defensive player that you kind of see having a breakout season this coming year?
I see some guys on the defensive line that I really like. Our star defensive lineman is a kid by the name of Peyton Zadroik. Peyton's dad, Dan, was an Air Force running back in the day. Peyton has always put pressure on the quarterback from the nose guard position. He's just built like a box. He's the strongest kid I've ever seen at the D1 level personally. On one side of him, I think a guy with an opportunity is a guy by the name of Dan Groby. And the other side, Caleb Tompkins, both out of Texas, big Texas kids. I think that defensive line is going to surprise some people, and guys like Jake Martin and, on the back end of the defense, he'll probably fit into that equation. And we'll just have to see how it rolls. But count on Peyton to make some noise.
Sounds good.
So Air Force, it seems really they seem to value seniority, and it's important in terms of like playing time. Is this true, or is this just a misconception?
I think it's a byproduct of what what the situation is. And like I had mentioned at the top of this, I think one of the reasons Air Force won 40 games in that 4-year span was specifically because that 2020 season, they had to basically play a true freshman team, which was fairly unheard of, in the history of the Air Force program. And what ended up happening on the other side, of course, was a lot of success. Going 8 games into last season, we were undefeated. Things were looking very promising. Got bit by the injury bug, and like you had mentioned, finished with 9 wins. Statement, final game for that class, beating the top defensive, run stopping team in JMU, and actually they gave up 70 yards a game, and on our first official carry we got that. So
yeah, that was amazing. And I think even Air Force was ranked at 22 or 19. They got up there.
They did, and they beat a JMU team that was ranked 24th.
Yep, it was a pretty good season. Like you said, there was a stretch of, I don't know if it was 4 games. I think it was the first loss Army, and then there's kind of this downhill struggle there for, I don't know if it was four games or so, and then like you said, end up on that positive high note.
Yeah, it was rough. It was Army, UNLV at Hawaii, and then a loss at Boise State, and we ended up back in the Armed Forces Bowl, and we've been very successful there.
A hot topic in college football landscape, I'd say probably for the last 12 months is the transfer portal and NIL. And so, with the Air Force, it's kind of a different ball game there in terms of the other teams and other folks you talk about. Can you kind of tell us how the transfer portal NIL affects Air Force and how it might be different from, a more, a standard university or college?
Well, so the one thing, and it's not talked about too much, and I think there's a reason for that. Your commitment at the United States Air Force Academy is predicated on a certain number of semesters. So once you enter as a in this case, a collegiate athlete, sometime after your sophomore year, you get that decision that, hey, this is for me, or maybe this is not. You had mentioned Micah Davis earlier. Micah did leave after his sophomore year. We occasionally do, mostly in basketball, but we do have people leave occasionally. But that's it. We don't get anybody. As far as NIL goes, the only way that a student military athlete can profit along the terms of NIL, an example would be the individuals that we mentioned, Trey Taylor and Bo Richter. They have basically put a pause to their military commitment because they were able to, and they can, when given the opportunity, they can profit along those lines of NIL. Great example was with Trey in Oklahoma City, and the Jim Thorpe people lavishly rewarded his award victory with a beautiful Rolex watch, amongst some other things. So I'm glad that kid's the exception. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is right now.
And something that you brought up pre-show that I wanted to talk about, because I don't think it's known everywhere, but we were kind of talking about what happens when you go pro. Do you have to take do your active duty service right after that, or do you get to go pro and then serve your time afterwards? Can you talk to us about how that works?
Yeah. So, in the last 15 years that I've been around the program, it's been very predictable. And typically what it involves is, if there is a Republican in office, they will allow the, your military branches to go and play pro if that opportunity avails itself, while also promoting that branch of the military. While that is going on in their downtime, they will do reserve stuff, and then they will do their full commitment after their pro career ends. Now, when there is a Democrat in office, typically it's the other way around, to where they have to do their 2-year minimum commitment, and then they can pursue professional athletes. So we've got a very distinct split with this last class. Trey Taylor and Bo Richter, because of the COVID turnback, actually graduated in December of 2023. They are eligible to play and then do that first scenario. Now, the group that graduates here this summer, they will get their 60 days after they graduate to kind of, put themselves in line. A lot of guys do go to mini camps and stuff if they can, and then they will have to start their commitments.
All right. So then, coming back to our 2024 team, what would we talked about a lot of the losses from 2023 coming into 2024. So what do you think the main strength of this 2024 team is?
Well, this will probably give you an idea of how tough things could be. The strength of this team is special teams right now. We've got a rare 4-year starting kicker in Matthew DePore, who, if given the same opportunities that he's had recently, will break the all-time leading scoring record for Air Force football, held by another kicker by the name of Luke Strable. So great place kicking, solid. We got a guy, Kurt Chesney, as our long snapper. He started last year. He'll be back. Luke Fryer, he'll be punting. He's very, very good sized punter. So that's one of our strengths. The other one, I think, slightly behind that, is going to be what happens quarterback, fullback, tailback. If those positions stay healthy, when that offensive line gels, I think they'll be very competitive.
One thing we've noticed, and I think like it's an evolution you're just seeing, and not just college football, but I think college sports in general with the NIL and the transfer portal. It's almost like the head coach is now becoming more of like a general manager, if you will, and not really so much into the X's and O's. Given that Air Force doesn't take transfer portal players, um, has that role? Have you seen any of that at Air Force? Like, are they having to actively? I think like a lot of times coaches are having that. Not only that they're recruiting new players, but they have to recruit their current team, right, to stay because they don't want them to leave. Are you seeing any of that at all at Air Force in terms of retention and recruitment?
Well, I'll tell you, to your point, that's very accurate. We've got a coach that's, it's been there. I believe this is Troy Calhoun's 17th or 18th year. Very successful. Not the all-time winningest coach. That's Fisher DeBerry, but he's probably got a chance to catch him if he sticks around. But as far as that general manager analogy, Troy Calhoun is probably as close to a Bill Belichick type of figure that you will see, at least in Colorado. We've got Coach Prime in Boulder, and we got Coach Norvell at Colorado State. But Troy Calhoun will amaze you with how he does not answer your questions. For example, if you were to ask him about the quarterback position, like I have in the past, he will tell you about no individuals, but traits of that position that liken to a point guard, for example, in the ability to distribute the ball. Also, he makes a lot of baseball references, and he is very much a team manager. Our offensive coordinator is the longest tenured in D1 football by the name of Mike Thiessen. Mike is the triple option, guy. He ran it. He coaches it. We've got a lot of coaches that were Air Force players. 95%.
So now that the spring practice is over, we get a little bit of a break before summer ball kind of hits. And given all of the losses on both sides, offense and defense, which position group do you think is, I don't know. I don't know if most concerning is the right, or has the most opportunity for growth is maybe a better way to say it. Yeah.
Well, let's go right back to the beginning, right? You guys mentioned it at the top of the broadcast. This offensive line, we've got mostly sophomores about to be juniors on that offensive line. Now, back in 2021, that was a great formula for us. We've got some kids like Luke Vandehar, Jace Soltovich, a kid by the name of Alec Falk. Alec's dad, Carl, was next to, Coach Lobo on the offensive line back in the 90s. If that group can find some kind of identity, I think you're going to equate to maybe some wins. This is a difficult schedule this year.
So how do you? Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, most, and I don't know, and this is just my own ignorance. Like, most schools, I guess they have to find innovative ways to kind of coach these kids in the off season, if you will, right? So, like, it's the strength and conditioning guy that has to do it. Does Air Force have to deal with that too, or because it's the military academy, like maybe there's other ways of kind of coaching up the offensive line in the off season, so to speak?
Well, I'll tell you what, these service athletes have a daily itinerary that consists of very specific scholastic and athletic tasks. Their day starts, right before when the sun comes up, typically ends around midnight or later, depending if it's a week for academic testing. They are working out. We've got a long tenured, strength and conditioning coach. And yeah, I mean, that's what makes the military so special. These guys aren't just football players, they're not just student athletes, but they also have military commitments and they do drills together and they're in different squadrons, and it's pretty special, and it bridges the gap on some of the concerns that you might have at another school.
So after two 10-win seasons here and a 9-win this last year, and then losing all that production, what is a quote unquote successful year for Air Force in 2024?
Well, in my opinion, with all the change that you described, um, and our two biggest games, of course, are Army and Navy. If in 2024 the Air Force Falcons win two games, and it's those two games, there won't be as big an outcry as you might expect. However, um, with that being said, we play at Baylor this year. We play we play Oregon State at home. We've got some pretty difficult games besides the military games. I think that a successful season for the United States Air Force Academy would be bowl eligibility at 6 wins.
I just remembered something. Army's joining the American this coming year, right? So now they'll be in the American with Navy. Do you ever foresee like maybe sometime in the future where all three are kind of in the same conference, or?
Well, I'll tell you what, you have not heard the last of the proposed Pacific Mountain West idea, to where we bring in those two stragglers and we do a semi-super conference. I don't know. I would like to have a conference with Army and Navy. However, their physical location isn't really conducive to more than this yearly contest.
And kind of talking about that conference realignment and the Mountain West, what is being out there in Colorado and deep into Mountain West Conference? What is the sentiment with like Washington State and Oregon State? Are they the Pac-2? Are they the Pac-12? Are they the Mountain West? What? How do you guys view Oregon State and Washington State?
I think it's very similar to back in the day when we used to play Notre Dame. We consider them kind of like an independent right now. I would like to see them end up with us, but you just never know.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the natural thing is for them to end up in the Mountain West, but with all the stuff going on with the ACC and the lawsuits with Florida State and Clemson, I could see a world where it doesn't make any sense, but I could see a world where, ACC is going to have some exodus depending on how those lawsuits go. And then they're going to grab Washington State and Oregon State, and you're going to have, Washington State, Oregon State, Cal, and Stanford on the West Coast, and then all these other teams on the East Coast. I mean, crazier things have happened, right? But yes, I don't know that Washington State, Oregon State are in a rush to do anything. I think they are hoping that's exactly how it plays out, I would guess.
Yeah, I would too.
Well, is there anything that you want to share that we didn't cover here on the Air Force team here in 2024?
I think one of the things that's important, that if you get an opportunity, both of you guys, and if you do, you can be my guest, is Falcon Stadium has finally gone through some renovations. We have taken out the east side, the east stands, and we've updated it, and we've got luxury boxes, and most importantly, we have some viewing areas to not only view the game, but we have that unique flyover every game, and it's pretty amazing. So if I was going to talk about what could be pretty awesome this year, it would definitely be an opportunity to come to Falcon Stadium and see what happens. And this is a rare year we haven't had in the last 4 to where we will actually be going to West Point again. And West Point, New York is a pretty cool place if you're a military football fan.
Absolutely. I like to ski, but I've never been out to Colorado, so maybe I can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Come see an Air Force football game and do some skiing out there. Be
Yeah,
kind of fun.
absolutely. Maybe catch a Bronco game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly thank you for your time, Rick, and go Falcons.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. And I'll tell you what, if anybody has an opportunity, this is a very special collaboration you guys got going here. I got a chance to catch up with some of your recent broadcasts. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we're doing our best to G5 doesn't always get that love that the P5 or P4. I'm not sure what to call anything anymore. But it gives them a chance to get their voice heard and let other people know about G5. Like, you just talk to your average football fan that watches whatever CBS, NBC, ABC puts out there Saturday night. They're familiar with their Big Tens and maybe a couple ACC schools and definitely the SEC, but it's getting to know, like, there's so many more teams. We got, what is it, 64
64.
with that's a huge makeup, and it's fun football to watch, like Air Force, like we talked about at the very beginning. Very, very different. And the cool thing about football, in my opinion, is these offensive and defensive styles, and when they go up against each other, and
like Hawaii versus Air Force, right? 2 very contrasting styles.
And like, how do you play chess and stop the other one? And something being in Iowa, something I'm looking forward to is like, when USC has to go play at Penn State in the snow, like, what does that stuff look like? And I think it's great. It's almost kind of like the March Madness here. When we got the tournament, that anybody can beat anybody on a given day, just who can go out there and execute. But yeah, it's just getting people to know more about G5 football, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, and you're not trying, you're actually doing it. To your point, the Air Force Academy has 5 consecutive wins over Power 5 schools. Throw in CU and Baylor and Washington State. We know what to do. So I'm glad that we have this format.
We're glad to provide it for you, and we hope to have you back on sometime soon in the near future.
Absolutely. I'm going to set you guys up with a little interview from one of my Air Force guys, and we'll kind of see what that looks like.
Sounds great, man. We'd love it.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, guys. Take care.